Well, good evening, everybody. If I could have your attention, please. If I could have your attention. Thank you very much, and we want to thank you for being at our June 6th Hendersonville Regional Planning Commission meeting. We have got a full house tonight. People standing in the hallways, and we're just delighted that you came to see us tonight. I promise you that. I know you just wanted to say hello and tell us what a good job we're doing, so thank you very much. We appreciate that. We got us an Amber Alert going on here, looks like. Let me just take a moment before we get into the agenda tonight. We do have a quorum present, but tonight, just kind of let us fill you in a little bit on where we're at in these particular hearings that we're going to be, the items of business we're taking care of tonight. For those that, just incidentally, how many of you have been to one of the other meetings that we've had concerning Meridian or Forest Park? Can I see? Or okay, most everybody. You'll recall that we've had a situation in these particular proceedings where we would have hearings and then there was deferrals, and I actually did continuances. And so we have now come to the place where we have held the hearings, done at least a continuance, I believe, on each one of those projects, and those hearings were officially closed. And so you'll notice tonight that we do not have officially any public hearings. However, we do want to hear from you. And as we have done in the past, in situations similar to this, is when the time comes for us to deal with these matters, we would entertain, and this is where I'm asking you now, if you would like to, as a group or whatever, for the Forest Park submittal or the Meridian submittal, if you would like to find 3 speakers, 3 people that would speak on behalf of everybody else, that would be fair. And I know that you'll understand that. We've received your emails. We received some of your phone calls, and I know other commissioners probably have as well. And what I would like to say to you now is thank you for being involved in the process. Thank you for making your voices known. That's the way it works. And tonight, you know, we will make decisions based upon the merits of the submittals. It's what we always do. We will make sure that everything comes in line. We'll make sure of how it affects other things around it. And I am very confident of these commissioners that are up here that we serve along with, that they have the acumen and the wisdom to help us come to some right conclusions. Just to be forthright tonight, we will be talking about the land use plan. We'll be talking about all the issues that I know you're very keen about and very interested in. And so as we begin tonight, I just want to let you know that's where we're at. Now, depending on how this commission goes tonight, how they vote on particular issues, it may or may not go your way. And if it does not, you just need to understand that if that happens, and we have not talked about this, so we don't know until we actually start discussing it tonight. But you need to understand that if perchance something did pass, this is not the end of the story. This is the first part of it. It then goes on to BOMA, Board of Mayor and Aldermen, where it goes to the General Committee, and it comes out of that committee, and then we'll go to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen as a board. And so there's much more to this than just what happens tonight. However, I would like to say that hopefully tonight we can deal wisely and we can deal fairly and make sure that all concerns are heard. And so I want to thank you once again for being involved in the process, and we're glad that you're here tonight, and I hope that a tone of civility and a tone of friendship can pervade, and I know it will, because we've got great residents in Hendersonville, okay? So we thank you so much. We have everyone here tonight, aside from Frank Penson, and I believe everybody else is present. So let that be duly noted. And what I would like to do, I'd like all the commissioners, if you would at this time, take a look at your agenda. And without objection, unless you have objection, I would like to go through items 1 through 6 tonight, and then immediately move to items 9, 11, and 13, where we have items to deal with. And then, without objection, I'd like to come back to item number 8.
So moved. Commissioner
Okay.
Jenkins?
Got so moved. We got a second? All right. Any more discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Thank you very much. All right. So we got the roll call, no public hearings. Any requests for assistance? None. Additions to agenda, we've talked about that. Minutes of May 2nd. Do I have a motion?
Move to approve.
Motion by Atchley, second by Millsaps. Any more discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Consent agenda items, we have MCC Investment, site renewal, owner MCC Investments LLC, and we also have Mansker Farms, Phase 13, Section 1, final plat.
Move to approve.
Move to approve, Atchley, second. Millsaps. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Now let's go down to item number 9. Item number 9, the first one we have is Express Oil. It's a site plan. Mr. Rogers, who's going to be handling this one?
Mr. Whitten.
Mr. Witt, you're recognized.
I'll make it as brief as I can. Express Oil is going on the old Cole and Garrett Funeral Home lot. They have double frontage on Main Street and on Hunter's Trail back behind Main Street. The building itself fronts on Main Street. It really only has, their main access is on Main Street. They're asking for a waiver of the requirement to provide sidewalk, curb, and gutter on the Hunter's Trail frontage. It's about 75 feet of frontage. Otherwise, they agree with all staff comments.
Okay, do we have anybody from Express Oil, please? Might want to just take a moment, introduce yourself, and explain to us why you would like the waiver.
My name is Philip Pearson.
Excuse me, I'm sorry, my bad, hold on, there you go, go ahead.
My name is Philip Pearson with Little John Engineering. Here to represent Express Oil on this project. We've received comments from the staff, worked with the staff on several issues and worked out everything. And in agreeing with staff comments on the waiver in the back, there's no other sidewalks on Hunter Trail, and our area back there is a good distance from our building and all that, and so we would like to request a variance on that, and be happy to answer any other questions you may have.
Okay. Mr. Witt,
You can.
any other comments or any other?
I was just wondering if there was payment in lieu of?
According to the comments, it says a payment in lieu of.
We're doing payment in
Additional
lieu of
widening of Main
on
Street.
the
and
on the Main Street.
I deferred Mr. Whitten, if he would
sorry.
if he would answer that, please.
Right, they are doing payment in lieu of for the Main Street frontage, where sidewalk, curb and gutter is also, sidewalk is also required. Isn't that right, Marshall? And then for the Hunter's Trail frontage, the city engineer's comment says that payment in lieu of is required, but again, they're requesting the waiver from the construction and the payment in lieu of.
So that would be an exception?
It would be a waiver of the requirement.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, do we have, you have a motion or?
Oh, I have a question.
Okay, Ms. Pirelli.
Thank you. Boyd, so with the Walton Ferry Old Shackle interchange that will be coming from TDOT in the next year or two, the widening, how far back is that going to go? I know,
It's not going to go quite
It's not going to go that far.
outside. It'll stop probably where the Dollar Tree, where the Dollar Tree store right after the gas.
We shouldn't. Well, I bought an $85,000 traffic signal that was already
okay.
there.
Well, I guess why I'm asking is because I'm not a proponent of sidewalks to nowhere, but at some point, we've had a lot of citizens in Hendersonville ask for sidewalks, so I think we need to put the infrastructure in. It may take years for connectivity, but I think that we need to start moving ahead and putting in some of this infrastructure, because I know that improvement, I believe sidewalks on the other side of Gallatin Road are going to go all the way down to Noakes possibly.
Yes.
So there is a possibility that at some point that whole area could be sidewalked. Thank you.
Okay, would you like to make a motion?
I agree
Just-
with Ms. Petrelli. You know, there are a lot of areas that don't have sidewalks, but we do have to eventually plan for them. So let's just go ahead and put that in. Ms. Petrelli, if that's your motion, I'll certainly second it.
Just approve with all staff comments, and the waiver would not then be granted.
Waiver's denied.
Waiver's denied.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be the motion. You want to make that motion?
I would note too that if you don't mind me, there's a box culvert at the end of our property there, which would make it difficult to bring the sidewalk up. The box culvert is not wide enough to get the sidewalk back over onto it. If we did, are required to do sidewalks back there, we would ask that we could shorten it up to where the stream is, where that box culvert is.
Okay, that would be a matter that we'll just work through with staff.
Okay.
Public Works, but we'll accept the motion right now. Who wants to make that?
Or if we could pay in funds in lieu of back there.
Okay.
Okay, so the motion I was going to make is move to approve with all staff comments and deny the waiver.
Well, he's willing to do payment in lieu of, so if we just, yeah. So the motion would be with all staff comments and payment in lieu of for the sidewalks in the back. Okay?
I'll modify my second.
Okay, modify the second, okay? Got the motion, a second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. You're approved.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next item that we'll take up is Tabor Dental. Who's handling this one? Mr. Whitten?
The applicant has agreed with all staff comments.
Okay,
Move to approve.
okay. Move to approve Ms. McCormick, second by Mr. Bristol. Any more discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, you're approved. Tabor Dental's approved. Moving down to item number 11, Eagle View. Who's handling that? Ms. Baker?
There we go. You could say it.
Eagle View is a 4-acre lot just north of Willow Park, located in the planning region. They're requesting, zoned SR1, the minimum lot size is 12,500. So they're proposing 11 lots here. They've agreed to be annexed into the city. And I think they agree with all staff comments, except they request a waiver for the street improvements.
Okay. Do we have a representative? Please identify yourself and just for the record.
My name is Siddhartha Nilameen, and I'm trying to build a subdivision on 650 New Shackle Island Road, and I accept all the comments from the city, but I'd like to request for the waiver for the street improvement.
Okay. A waiver. Somebody talk to me a little bit about it.
That would be in regard to the New Shackle Island Road frontage. They'll be building a cul-de-sac off of New Shackle, but they're asking for a waiver for the payment in lieu of that's specified for the New Shackle Island Road frontage, and Marshall may want to add some additional comments to that.
Marshall?
Which is typical for the frontage. We'll request they improve that to what's identified in our land use plan. I think it calls for, and Fred can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it calls for, five lanes for New Shackle, and they would be responsible for half of that as far as the additional road. And I believe it's a rural section, so there would not be curb and gutter. But I think also sidewalk would be a part of that as well. And
Okay, so
that's what that.
to remain consistent, we need that payment in lieu of at least.
Well, right, I guess that's the question. With it being so far outside, I think the likelihood of widening that section of New Shackle is, I'm not sure what the likelihood is, but, if it's your will, we can require that. And
Okay, all right.
Might add, of course, keep in mind, New Shackle is a state route.
Right.
So it would be our desire that if there's any widening done, especially north of Stop 30, since that's not in the city except for this one parcel, that the state would provide any widening. So, but if you do require the payment in lieu of, that money would be held in an account indefinitely. I'm not certain exactly how it would be used. I'm not sure if it's possible we could turn that money over to TDOT. Not sure if TDOT would want it. So it is a bit of a complicated situation, especially since it's about a quarter of a mile or about 1,000 feet north of the city limits.
Okay, any commissioners have any questions or a motion?
So is the city getting the money or no?
Would-
Or is the state?
We would receive the money and hold it in an account indefinitely.
But we can't spend it? Okay, thank you.
Bottom line right
Well,
there.
we can't spend it until the state made the improvement. Is that what I,
Right.
yeah.
Well, yeah, but it goes to the
And
state ultimately.
if they were going to make the improvement, the state would probably do the widening.
And they would receive the money? Would
No,
we
it-
transfer it to the state?
It would be our 20%, probably our 20% share if it was if we had to contribute to the project, it would be,
So how long conceivably could this money be held? Just give me a 3, 2, 5, 10, 20, 50?
15 years.
Wow. Okay, thank you.
Okay, do we have a motion from the commission? Move to approve with the waiver or not? Ms. McCormick?
All right, I'll be the one to step out on the limb here. Considering the indefinite, no date certain in this particular situation, I normally don't like to waive sidewalks either. But in this situation, I mean, the likelihood of the city even benefiting would be so remote that it almost feels oppressive to require it at this point. So my motion in this matter would be to waive the payment in lieu of and to approve the project with all staff comments.
Okay, we have a motion to approve with all staff comments and a grant the waiver. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Ms. Ashley seconds. Any discussion?
Mr. Chairman, my
Mr. Lee.
question is the waiver is really not for sidewalks, it's for the road improvement. Is that correct?
That's correct. It's for the additional road, the road width that we would require for our land use plan.
Then I clarify that motion to just to strike the word sidewalks and just say road improvement.
Yeah.
Well,
Okay.
I know it's out there and it's way out there, but part of the reason that all of these people are in the room tonight is because we haven't done the road improvements that we needed to do 15 years ago. So
Need to hold your applause. Thank you very much.
I'm going to.
I know he's a rock star, but you know, whatever.
I can't support this, but
I would like to speak to it.
Okay, Ms.
Okay, for me, I'm all about improving roads we can improve. But when it's not a road that is ours to improve, that's my issue. I would say when it's something that, I mean, it's like trying to approve roads in Kentucky. That is not our area. So this particular road, while it's in our city, is not our road. So that's why my motion is as it is.
Okay, we have a motion, a second, and once again, remembering that this is a state route, and if it was going to be widened, that would be widened, and hopefully, as Mr. Rogers has said, that we would want the state to do as much as they possibly could do. So, we have a motion, a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay. You opposed? Okay, so Ms. Pirelli and Mr. Lee are opposed. It passes. Okay? All right.
Thank you.
Staff approved projects. Free Hill Business Park and Nearwater Subdivision resub. Lots 2C, 2D, final plat, and then Tabor Dental Lease Facility resub and final plat. Do I have a motion? I don't think we really need it, but just acknowledged it. Okay. All right. So with that, I believe we've covered items 9, 11, and 13. Let's move back now to item number 8 on the agenda, which is preliminary and final development plans. And the first one that we will take up tonight is Forest Park. And Mr. Rogers, we turn it over to you.
Okay, again, for the benefit of those who may not have been here last month, this project was on the agenda last month. There was a public hearing. There was quite a number of people spoke up, some for, some against, and the matter was deferred in order to prepare a transportation planning report. In the meantime, there have been a number of emails and petitions submitted to the Planning Commission and staff and to others, and I understand they have all received those. I've also printed a hard copy and placed it in the folders of the Planning Commission. This would include in particular, the petition with quite a large number of signatures, as well as the citizens' comments that went along with that petition. So with that said, again, this matter was deferred from the last meeting. The primary reason for that was to conduct a traffic study. As you may know, the developer had their own traffic study prepared, but the city wanted to hire our own traffic engineer and do a much broader study of the entire Saundersville Road corridor to determine what the ultimate needs would be for the widening of Saundersville Road and what that would cost and how we might pay for that. So a engineering firm has been hired through our city engineer, Marshall Boyd, in the Public Works Department. We met with the traffic engineer a couple of days ago, and bottom line is they've not completed the study. I think, as I mentioned here in the staff report, they have not completed their study. There's still work to be done, and but as I've also stated here in the staff report, it's likely that the report is going to state that the road will need to be 4-laned. And they're saying all the way to Lower Station Camp Creek. That's still a matter of discussion as to whether or not it needs to be widened just up to Settlers Way, Country Hills, where they intersect with Saundersville Road, or on up to the entrance of this development, or, as I said, all the way up to Lower Station Camp Creek Road and the Station Camp schools. But either way, it's going to cost quite a bit of money, and I'll back up and say, as you also are aware, the developer of Millstone is already responsible for widening to 4 lanes Saundersville Road from the bypass up to their main entrance. That'd be widening both sides of the street. And then they would also be making improvements at their other 2 or 3 entrances off of Saundersville Road. But still, there's a good distance from Innsbrook on up to Settlers Way and on up to Forest Park and on up to Lower Station Camp Creek Road. It's apparent that based on what we anticipate the cost of that to be, that it's no way that either the developer and or the city could afford to do that on our own, and we would have to seek federal funds for that. And typically, those funds, if we're able to get them, would cover 80% of the cost, and the city and the developer would possibly be in a position to cover the remaining 20%. Of course, that is a Board of Mayor and Alderman decision. They handle the purse strings and approve the budgets, so it would be their determination as to whether or not they wanted to move in this direction. I've explained in the staff report the steps that we must go through to secure the funds. There's certainly by any means, there's no guarantee we can obtain the funds. We certainly can pursue those funds, but it's quite a task involved, and I will state that it would be 2021 before we could even compete for the limited amount of funds that's available for the Nashville metropolitan area. And then, as you know, it takes quite a few years to go through the plan development process, environmental review and environmental clearances, and then approval through TDOT and the Federal Highway Administration. So we are looking at a number of years to get it approved. So that is the update. I've included in your packet the same staff report that you received from at the last meeting, and we do have a drawing on the slide on the projector up here that shows the plan, you will note that they have removed the 2 cul-de-sacs coming off of Country Hills. So this has slightly reduced the number of lots, increased the open space, and decreased the density. I believe it has decreased the density. So with that, I would suggest that we, first of all, hear from the developer, receive any update they may have for you, and any discussion they may have regarding the funding of the road improvements, and then at that time, open it up for public comments.
Okay. All right, at this point, if the developer would come, and we're going to give you a chance to make your presentation.
Thank you. I know this has been a process. It is a process.
I want to introduce yourself.
Yes, Mike Stanton, representing 10 Home Sites.
Yeah.
First, let me start by saying we started early engaging the community. We did that in various ways. We did that in some one-on-one meetings. We've done that in community meetings. And we did that being good neighbors. And we wanted to hear feedback, and we've taken feedback. And then we've also provided some information back. So we've been engaged and want to continue to be. We understand there's traffic issues, which has been the #1 complaint that we've heard. There's an issue now, and we understand that. And what we hope that you'll see throughout our presentation is, will we impact some of that marginally? Will we help that? I think a great deal. So let me just, for the sake of the people that weren't here, I was going to try to do a condensed version, but I want to go ahead and go through, for those who weren't here that's here this time. This site is, it's the Jenkins Farm, as you can see here. It's 260 acres when you add the tract that we're buying, which is a connection point at Saundersville Road. It is in the rural living land use plan. That's the current land use, is rural living. And I'll talk about rural living in just a second and how we based our plan. It's currently zoned ER, which is state residential, which allows, I think, up to 1 lot per acre. We're asking for an SR1 zoning, and that's indicated by all the yellow that you see, which is surrounding us. This is a growth corridor, has been for years, and it's not like we're out here asking for something that hasn't been there. This property was annexed a few years ago, back in a time when you didn't have to get the homeowner's permission. The city just reaches out and gets it. And they do that for a reason, and you do it based on a plan that you have for it. I want to talk about that. But on this particular slide, Mr. Rogers is correct, we're at 2.51 units an acre, which is now the least dense development on Saundersville Road. The next one is Saundersville Station, which is at 2.54 units an acre. Stonecrest at 2.6, and Millstone at 3.05. Of course, Millstone has a different zoning than SR1. It's a little bit more dense because it has some commercial involved as well. We're only asking for 25% of our homes to be attached, and when I say that, Forest Park is a for-sale community. There's no rental properties, there's no apartments, and when we look at the land use plan, I think Mr. Rogers mentioned at the last meeting, is the land use plan allowed for that under a CSD, which we're not proposing. Again, it's rural living, suburban, and SR1 is surrounded by it. As I mentioned earlier, this was annexed back at a time when it didn't require permission from the homeowner. So the homeowner's been paying city taxes without the benefit really of an approved plan on it. Rural living, the land use plan actually allows for a conservation subdivision plan to be, if there's a CSD overlay in the rural living plan, and that's straight out of your land use transportation plan. And the purpose of it is to conserve steep slopes, tree masses, and to develop in areas that make sense, and to preserve areas that make sense. Under the CSD, you're allowed 3 units an acre. and we're at 2.51. We could be here asking if we went at the max number, either at SR1 or as the CSD plan, we could be asking for 780 homes, which is, we're at 653, so we're well under that. And we did that because we wanted to come in with a conservation plan. Again, it's allowed under the land use plan, rural living. This is an example that you guys have seen in your packet. It's an example out of Randall Arendt's book, which talks about conservation planning. I can tell you that we didn't read the book to come up with the plan. We actually went to the city's website and pulled the land use plan to determine what was the vision of the city and how do we meet that vision? How do we design a community that fulfills this obligation as a vision that the city and this body and other, not maybe everybody on this board, but this board and BOMA has agreed to a land use plan. And we wanted to make sure we complied with that. Some of the benefits of a conservation plan is it reduces stormwater runoff, it reduces the environmental footprint. You put more land in the permanent open space. We're now up to 37% open space in Forest Park. This again out of your land use plan focus area 4.1. The focus area for conservation subdivision was based on two farms. It was the Norman Farm and the Jenkins Farm. Our piece of property is the Jenkins Farm property. As you can see, it says that there's 300 acres and you could have up to 900 homes on that 300 acres. That's 3 units an acre. And part of the conservation plan, and I mentioned it just a minute ago, is if you give me this, you can get this. And your land use plan says the development program for the focus area includes a conservation subdivision designed where houses are clustered in smaller lots instead of distributed over the entire area. When I talk about, and I've talked to many people about this community, and we talk about 260 acres off Saundersville Road, the first question I get is where? And it's a good question. It's because it's tucked back in, it's nestled back in, and we, as you'll see in just a minute, we designed the community to maintain that rural feel. We're doing a conservation plan to save and preserve those tree masses, which are important, and we've heard that. We've heard that through some of the comments that we've seen. So again, part of the conservation plan is being responsible. I think this is a perfect example of how development and conservation planning can be married and be harmonious. So looking at those two farms, we wanted to get a visual of what did that look like. So I've identified in this exhibit the Norman Farm. Part of this is the Norman Creek community that was recently approved. And then the community in the middle, which has not yet been approved, nor has anyone purchased it as far as I'm aware of. And then our Jenkins property, that makes up what the focus area was, these three parcels of property. If you look at, and you can't see it here, but maybe in your packet, that's 780 homes on actually 344 acres, which is 2.26 units an acre. You'll notice, obviously, Jenkins is the largest portion of the property. And I'll show you in a minute, we have the most developable portion of the property, which makes sense that our density is a little bit higher, our open space is maybe just a touch lower, but it's consistent with the CSD plan. When you look at how do you design a plan, you look at slope analysis, and that's what this is an example of, and you see the yellows and the reds. We used this on Forest Park. We also used it as we were identifying what the Norman Creek East property could be potentially developed as. And that's what drove the numbers that was in the previous slide. This exhibit, we just blacklined the communities over a Google image, and you can see that the area that we're preserving and conserving is the areas that we need to be, and which was the vision of the city. It's where the steep slopes are, it's where the tree masses are. And you can see by looking at the area where the density is a little bit higher, it's more compact, clustered, which is what the conservation plan said to do. It's in areas that doesn't have the tree masses. And I'll take it a step further. and I'll show it in just a minute, but we not only looked at this level, we went on the site, we looked at existing tree masses, we looked at how could we design the plan to not only preserve the tree masses we have, the massive tree masses in the slopes, but internal. How can we design a plan to where trees don't end up being in the middle of a lot, but on the back of a property line, so we're not mowing down trees just to be mowing them down. Again, wanted to be responsible. I mentioned this, the first meeting that we had, it took us 5 months to come up with this plan. A lot of time spent in the field, a lot of times understanding the topography, surveying areas to make sure that we were doing the right thing. The main thing is we wanted to make sure we brought a community to this board, to this body, that we could all be proud of. We're all local residents. Our whole team have lived in Hendersonville since the 70s. So it's not like a group of out-of-town builders or developers that are coming in and trying to destroy a piece of property. We're trying to be true developers, conserving areas that need to be, and coming in with a plan that I think we all can be proud of at the end of the day. I'm going to go on to the next slide just because it's a little bit bigger than the previous one. But Mr. Rogers mentioned just a minute ago, we did remove the 15 lots, the 2 cul-de-sacs at Country Hills. Again, another sign of listening. Ms. Petrelli, you asked us, would we consider that? And I told you we certainly would consider it, and we did what you asked, and certainly what the Country Hills people were happy with. You'll also note, I'm going to actually go back, even though it's hard to see, the main entrance, or the first home that you would see coming down Sarnesville Road, will actually sit actually a little over 2 football fields away from Sarnesville Road. To be exact, the first house is 655 feet off of the road. We intentionally left that first 655 feet soft. And when I mean that, we didn't load it with houses. We created these nice memory points, this elongated entry experience that we wanted not only our community to enjoy, but as part of this master plan is an east-west subcollector, which is part of the major thoroughfare plan. So we knew this was going to be a window to the city as far as a navigable route to get around the city, and we wanted to make sure it looked nice. I mentioned when I talk to people about the community, they say, where is it? Because they just can't understand where this much acreage is left. And that's because we set the biggest portion of the community set 1,600 feet off of the road. So when you're driving down Sarnesville Road, you're going to be looking 2 football fields in before you see the first house. And you're probably going to see a couple houses sprinkled up on the hillsides, but the rest, the bulk of the community, you're just not going to be able to see because it's set so far off the road. Again, as I mentioned, the main collector going through bisecting the property east to west is a sub-collector street. We met with Mr. Rogers and made sure that that was part of our plan. That's a 3,600 linear foot roughly road at a cost of about $2.5 million investment from us to the city to make sure that we do that major thoroughfare plan. I will note that on that sub-collector road that there are only going to be side entry homes. There'll be no front entry homes on the sub-collector. Additionally, all corner lots will also be side entry homes. We do have some front entry homes, which are the E lots that will be internal to the site. The A lots are the estate lots, and then of course we have some villas and some townhomes. And I will make a note about that as well, because we're going to be talking about traffic, and I'll have Jim Harrison come up and talk about traffic. 30% of this master plan caters to or targets empty nesters and young professionals. And the benefit of that is they're net contributors, especially the baby boomers. They're not out at peak hours taking kids to school. They're going to Cracker Barrel at 10 o'clock in the morning when traffic's not as high. They don't have kids in school. So the baby boomers are, I'll wait. I didn't know I was a comedian. May have a new gig going on. But they do. They have less impact on infrastructure and are out spending money in the city during the day, which the city needs. We are at 653 homes, 2.51 units an acre, down from 257. We've asked for no variances to the SR1 PD. We've committed to minimum lot widths, sizes, everything that was required in the SR1. We're not asking for any zoning or variance change. We believe this will be a 10-year build-out, so it's not like 653 houses are going to drop out of the sky and be on the site in one day. It's just not the way it works. We understand that in the 10-year build cycle that you're going to have some times where interest rates may slow down pace. And I think the benefit of that and the benefit of a master plan like this is it gives you time to not have this great impact. It trickles in over time, and you have time to do the infrastructure work that's needed as it builds out. This is the current condition of the community at Saundersville Road. If you're driving down, there's two series of brick entry walls. The first one that you get to if you're driving from Hendersonville, that will be the most eastern portion of our property. That will be gone, and I'll show you what that looks like right here in just a second. Again, mentioned earlier about having this soft entry, this elongated entry experience. We've broken it down by labeling this as A, B, C. A being the front entry, the entry monumentation that you'd see from Saundersville Road that identifies the community. B is an area where we divide the boulevard, create a soft zone, and we've got a little relic area there with nice features. And then the C, I'm pointing them out so I don't have to come back to this in a second. The C is a stream crossing, and we wanted to make sure that was really nice, so we're doing something really unique there. So this is the entry as if you were standing across from Saundersville Station looking at our community. You'll see that this is shown with two lanes in, 2 lanes out. That was based on our traffic study. As you'll also see on your master plan, we've shown no other connection. We're showing stub streets, but our road width on the sub-collector is wider than Saundersville Road, and so we've worked with the fire department and got them happy with that. This also has 2 4-foot bike lanes, and of course we're still doing the 5-foot grass strip and the 2 5-foot sidewalks. You'll notice that we've got 2 raised elevated entry monumentation beds. This would be with stone and a pressed metal or stamped metal nameplates, again keeping that rural rustic feel. This is that divided area, that soft zone, where we wanted to recreate a relic that could have been on the property, the old farm from years ago, where it could be a spring house, just whatever you can envision that little relic being. And then on either side, flanked on either side of the road, you've got 2 4-foot by 10-foot monument columns with a 5-rail fence that goes out to either side of the property. And then the stone bridge crossing. Again, this is diagrammatical, but that's kind of what our vision is for, again, carrying those elements on down the boulevard. This would have stone columns and gas lanterns. And then as you cross the threshold and enter into the community, you'll come to what we call the Life Center at Forest Park. This is an area where the main area, amenity area for our community homeowners. It'll have a social building, it'll have a beach entry pool, a splash pad, a playground. Also, we've incorporated a multi-use event lawn. Can be used, we got it set up, I think, for soccer right there. It can be used for football, frisbee, movies on the ground, you name it. It's got multiple benefits. This is a 4-acre amenity site, so it's not small, it's very large. It's got passive nature path that meanders through it, which also there's also a nature path that bisects the property behind the sub-collector as well, that connects from this amenity area to the future connection point to our west.
Okay.
More than that, we wanted to make sure that we also created some other connection points within the community. Instead of just having one amenity, we wanted to have a few other connection points. So you'll see B, which is a covered pavilion. You'll see the image there. It's just a covered pavilion. It's a social gathering area. It can be used for social events, birthday parties, whatever the neighborhood would like to use it as. Then also within the the attached home areas, we also wanted to make sure we had some connection points for those neighbors as well.
Okay. Are you about coming close?
Yes.
Coming in for a landing?
Am approaching the runway, but then I'll also ask for Mr. Harrison to come up and
Yeah,
speak
we'll let
as well.
Jim come up, and then once you're complete, we'll allow some people to speak, and then I'm sure the commissioners have questions for you.
Okay, perfect. Well, we were going to go through product, so at this point, I will just let Mr. Harrison come up, talk about traffic and what we found in the study.
Okay, thank you. We'll be coming, so stay close.
Okay.
Mr. Harrison.
Jim Harrison with Civil Site Design Group. I just want to say appreciate staff and the engineer that is working on the transportation planning report, working alongside us with this. When we completed the traffic study back about, it's in March, we've been trying to work alongside that engineering firm to determine what's the big picture for improvements out along Saundersville Road. But really want to start by thanking Fred and Marshall both. We've worked on a focus that really has emphasized both long-term and short-term. Long-term being the transportation planning report and being able to facilitate using MPO dollars and gas tax money so that we can draw some of those funds back in to be used on our local streets. And that's what you often hear about the 80-20%, where we have a 20% match and then the federal gas tax money is 80%. That's the process that Fred has outlined in your report. The short term has been more identified in a third-party review that the engineer that's doing the transportation planning report did. They looked at intersections just like we did out along Saundersville Road. The bottom line, and I'm going to make this as brief as I can, there's about 3,200 homes ultimate planned on Saundersville Road. There's currently somewhere between, depending on whether or not you have Forest Park, there's somewhere around 42 to 50% of those homes on the ground. That means there's going to be a lot more homes that are still left to be built. So the traffic is going to increase.
Repeat those numbers one more time. Total number of homes.
I'm going to read them off here so I get them right. The total number, and this is in some of your exhibits that you have.
Right.
This is including the proposed Forest Park. We have 3238.
Okay.
And currently what we count right now is 1371, which is 42.3%. That's including the Forest Park number. If you take Forest Park number out, then it's 53%. But the bottom line is you're going to have growth that's already approved with lots that are out on Saundersville Road that's going to produce an increase about double of what the traffic is out there right now. So part of what we looked at with the intersections is to identify where improvements were needed. And we've given and gone through with Marshall, the city engineer, a very detailed list of not only what we plan as a long-term, how do we continue to monitor this subdivision, how does this subdivision will build out completely what it's got for 100% of its flow at both the intersection and everything else, but there's 3 or 4 other intersections, Settler Way, for example, Winbrook Trace, and then Cannon's Crossing, just to mention a few, that are either on the north side or the south side of those intersections. And at those intersections, we feel like there's a need within the next 2 to 4 years for there to be improvements at those intersections. That's based on our traffic study, and that's also based on what the third-party reviewer for the city had. So we feel like there's a need regardless, and let me say this, currently there are no designated funds that I'm aware of. There's been improvements in front of Millstone that have been proposed, and those are proposed to widen Saundersville Road in front of Millstone, but from there to the north, there are no designated funds at all to improve anything on Saundersville Road. That's why we believe we're an important part of that equation, because we bring a contribution. And what we are proposing is that we bring that $250 plus a total of $1,150 per lot for each lot that's developed that contributes to a fund that can take care of some of those things. Part of what we've done with Marshall is to identify specifically in that short-term plan how those intersections can be improved to take care of the capacity that's going to be needed. And we think that capacity is going to, that extra capacity is going to be needed within the next 2 to 4 years. We believe that strongly based on what we're seeing with the growth and what we're seeing with the traffic numbers. The bottom line of what we've done is we've outlined specific improvements along those key intersections. I'm going to just run through some other things that we're doing just very briefly because I want to make sure the Planning Commission understands the scope of what we're doing with the east-west connector that we're building through the development, which we also think is a key part of the infrastructure and the skeleton for transportation that we have to move throughout the city. There's badly needed an east-west corridor. That's $2.5 million. We have $750,000, $750,000 we have designated in impact fees. So we feel like that is a necessary component that's not there. So we bring something to the table that can facilitate those improvements. All this is backed up, and I'll be more than willing as we go further into this to answer any specific questions about specific intersections. There are utilities, there are sign monuments as you enter into subdivisions that need to be probably moved or corrected. There's extra lane width as you come out of existing subdivisions onto Saundersville Road. And there's also widening that needs to be done on Saundersville Road. And we believe the timing, and I don't think I'm speaking out of turn here because we've met with Marshall and gone over this with Marshall very carefully. We believe the timing of this allows us to take what's in the transportation report and put those improvements on the ground at those intersections so there can be a benefit within the next year or two that will directly benefit the residents that are out there right now as you get that on the ground. I think this is important to do just because it's going to be a problem without Forest Park. It's going to be a problem with Forest Park if we didn't do something about it. And we're proposing to have a short plan. We have put that on record with the city, a short-range plan to make improvements to take care of the capacity needs, and a long-range plan to help position the city to hopefully take advantage of some of the MPO dollars. Let me say one other thing. We are, just to make sure this is clear, with the new access, we're building it out for 100% of our lots. And we've looked at that impact, and we've also had the third-party reviewer look at that impact. We're building out a section in front and along Saundersville Road that we know will handle that as well. We've had the third-party reviewer look at that as well. So we're just here to answer any questions, but as we present this, we really believe that we bring part of the answer for what is a need, a very quick need along Saundersville Road.
Thank you, Mr. Harrison. Stay close by.
I will.
At this point, we would now take comments from, we're going to say 3. If you guys have come together, anybody here for Forest Park that would like to, that you didn't speak in a other public hearing, or you would like to speak, this would be the time now that we're going to allow that to happen. Anybody? Okay, please. Yeah, we'll take 3, and we want to try to hear from citizens. Thank you very much. If you would just state your name and for the
My
record.
name is Darlene Norman. I live at 217 Spyglass Way.
Yeah.
Forgive me. I've been a realtor in this area for 30 years, and I've watched the competitive edge between north of the city and south of the city, and I've lived in both locations over that time period. And Hendersonville is in a unique point right now with all of the growth that has happened south of the city and them running out of lots, for us to be in a wonderful position to help our homeowners finally get the appreciation out of their properties that they have been lacking over the past 20 years. If you watch the appreciation in homes south of the city as compared to north of the city, we don't compete. We compete with schools. But with this new plan coming in, and with you allowing, in Forest Park, they've got wonderful builders. I love what they're doing. I love the concept. My biggest objection is that we are building, watching what's happened with Millstone, being right on the top of Saundersville Road, with all of the dense population that they have. what that's doing to not just Saundersville Road, but to the impact of homes in our area, I think is detrimental. And when you look, and Forest Park is requesting to break up the lot smaller, to put more dense homes in there, I think that that is making us look more like, forgive my remarks, Antioch than Brentwood. And I think that takes away from the property value here.
Folks, if you'll please withhold your applause. Thank you very much.
And I'm not in opposition of growth. I do agree that maybe this development is going to add money to Saundersville Road, that we do need improvements there. Most people are very upset about the lack of infrastructure. I'm here more because I want Hendersonville to have a vision for their growth that helps the constituents. I love the idea of what Forest Park has done in an overlay to put, 2 homes on a lot. But it's up to you all to grant them a waiver to put this more high-density plan into place, which I object to, and I know a lot of other people do as well. It's one thing to say that 30% of it is going to be for baby boomers. Well, baby boomers don't live in townhomes, okay? They do have money. They do need villas. They need a lot of things, but they don't need townhomes. And we have so many townhomes projected to go in. It looks far too, and is affecting us negatively.
Thank you. Is there any more? Okay, we'll take this this lady, and then we'll take one more. You introduce yourself. Thank you.
My name is Julie Hall, and I live at 1715 Saundersville Road. Some of you may recognize my name from the petition. And we started Stop Forest Park. It was just kind of a way to raise awareness. I know the developers did hold public meetings, and they did, try to get their message out, but there were a lot of people that weren't aware of it. And we found that out through the petition. And there's a lot of people that are very upset about it. I live on Saundersville Road, 5 driveways from the proposed entrance. There are already in place townhomes to be built in Stonecrest. That is the next phase of Stonecrest, is more townhomes. How many more townhomes are we going to put on Saundersville Road? And the property that is directly across the street from the golf course eventually is going to be sold and developed. And I think we just have to think about the future and the future developments that are coming in. And I understand that they have gone, step by step through the conservation, land plan, and they have dotted all the I's and crossed all the T's. I understand that. And it's beautiful. I mean, the pictures are beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful. But for those of us that live there and that are going to be impacted by the traffic, the amount of cars coming in and out of there, and I believe that if the east-west connector road is an important part of the city's future, it can be done with estate lots as well. I don't know why this many homes have to go back there in order to accomplish that end goal. A lot of us moved out to the country to live in the country, and we're not living in the country anymore. And I know that that's a sob story for me, and oh well. But there are a lot of people that live out there, and we are going to be severely impacted by this. The traffic is not just Saundersville Road. The traffic is Vietnam veterans.
Everywhere.
It's everywhere. It's everywhere. So I just think you would
Well, please hold your applause. Please hold your
just
applause.
ask that you take the future of Saundersville Road into consideration.
Thank you. Is there one more? Okay, we'll take one more, and then we will turn it over to the commissioners to allow them to ask questions.
My name is Doug Ebelhar, and I reside at 1635 Saundersville Road. Thank you, first of all, for allowing us the opportunity to voice our concerns regarding this development. I have lived on Saundersville Road for 37 years. Back when Saundersville Road was a country lane. My house and about 8 other houses were on that road at the time. I currently live on top of a hill, and we have a beautiful home there. And when I look out over the valley, I see nothing but roofs and concrete at Saundersville Station. When I look to the left, I see a beautiful acreage called Jenkins Farm. And that right now is going to be turned into concrete and roofs. Now, development is fine, but we on Saundersville Road have had enough of it. Right now, we are maxed out. You know it and we know it. Millstone up here, the development they're building there is not, what, half done yet. They're already building houses right on the road. It's not good. I don't think personally, from my perspective, it's going to do any value to my home, it's going to do value to my property, and I live parallel to the entranceway to where this development is supposed to take place. My property also backs up to the back end of that. So I'm getting hit on both sides of this. So I don't see how it's going to help my property at all as far as increasing my property value as time goes on. Our homes are something we put a lot of value to. We put blood, sweat, and tears into it. And I don't think future developments on Saundersville Road at this particular point in time, with the infrastructure that's going on, with a lack of everything that's happening there, is going to do anything at all to enhance the area. So I would appreciate it as a citizen of Hendersonville and Saundersville Road that you take this into serious consideration before you let developers come in and start developing further on Saundersville Road in addition to what is already there. We're maxed out. We ask you, please, please, put this on the table, put it on the back burner. Let's get the infrastructure in place first and get everything ready, and then you can come back and look at something different as far as development goes. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Okay, we're going to go on now. If Mr. Stanton and Mr. Harrison, if you'll come back, stand at the podium. We want to go right into some questions, and I will start it out, and then commissioners, you can jump in with your questions. And at this point, we've allowed the developer to speak, and we've allowed the public to speak. Now it's time for this commission it's time for the planning commission to ask questions. So thank you very much. The first thing I want to ask, the issue that I have, and you mentioned it before, but in the staff report, it talks about the access road. And we talked about the access road, one access going in, and of course I have it that you guys are okay. The fire department's given an okay. But my question to you is their comment on the staff report under the fire department. It grants access, but it also says that the city of Hendersonville east to west corridor plan, we accept single access point provided it will connect with future projects as shown in the PDP. So I know we've said that they've given you the go-ahead for the single access, but have we got connectivity for future projects that might come along the way?
Yeah, we have showed, I think there's a total of 5 connection points, including the sub-collector to the Baird property.
Okay.
And part of the reason why this engineering was okay with it, the fire department was okay with it, was the width of our road, which is
30 something?
Yes, and
33?
it's wider. It's wider than Saundersville Road, and then the size of our Phase 1 also provided plenty of redundant access. So that's why that they were comfortable with it.
Talk to me a little bit about phasing. If this project were approved to move forward, how do you anticipate going forward with the phasing, and how many homes annually are you proposing that you estimate? I know it's not an exact science.
Yeah. Can you pull the presentation back up? I've left out.
Please don't go through all the homes.
No, I was going to bring up the phasing plan that may help answer that question. And whoever's driving, if you could, there's a phasing plan in there toward the back. It's color coded, and you'll see it. So again, we think it's probably an 8 to 10 year build out. That's it. So it's hard to tell, but you can see the largest area. That's Phase 1. There you go. That is Phase 1. So the width of the main subcollector and the fact that we've got all kinds of redundant access points, that's why engineering and the fire department was okay with it. We're showing, I think, 5 phases here that are large phases. It's market-driven. If things go well, it goes faster. If it goes slow, I see interest rates going up. I see a market reset throughout this project, and I think it's probably a 10-year build-out.
Okay. All right. Hold on one second. Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
before we leave that subject of a single point of access, just for the record, make it clear, planning staff does not concur that one point of access is sufficient.
Mr. Rogers, you can repeat
I
that.
state that planning staff does not agree that one point of access is sufficient. The other 5 points of access will be numerous years in the future, if ever, before they're connected, and this is a very large development for just one point of access.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Rogers. And that has been the position of staff since this was proposed, so. I have one more question. In the staff report, or staff comments, planning's asking for a detailed explanation as to how this qualifies as a conservation area, and you verbally done that, but have you turned that in in writing, that detailed,
I don't recall if we've done that, only in presentation form and in public forum.
okay.
Again, there was no litmus test for how much open space.
Yeah, there's not.
We just felt like, based on the 300 acres, 900 units, and identifying the areas that really was sensitive, and the purpose of that conservation overlay is how we arrived at our plan. But we have not, that I'm aware of, officially
And
sent something to Mr. Rogers.
And coming in today, though, you are at 37%.
That is correct. Singularly, we're at 40% when you look at the focus area, which is the Norman and the Jenkins property.
Okay, all right. Ms. Ashley?
Mr. Stanton, I had a question, and I apologize if I missed it. You made a comment about what your perceived age of the purchasers would be. Could you repeat that for me, please?
I think what I said, and maybe some little confusion, this community targets everybody from a young professional to somebody that can do an estate home, to a villa or a detached villa, which is the F lots. So I see that this is a range from young professionals in their 20s to people retiring in their 60s and 70s and beyond.
So are you implying that there won't be a lot of children in this?
I'm not implying that. What I'm saying is 30% of the development, the community, is targeted toward young professionals and baby boomer market.
Okay.
And that's a healthy mix. You don't want a whole community full of kids, because then it impacts schools even further.
Well, I was staring at the construction plan, so I just missed what
Okay.
you said. Thank
No,
you. I just wanted a
you're welcome.
clarification.
Thank you for the question.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I guess this question, just a few comments and then a question or two. Mr. Rogers, just wanted to make sure that I do understand that the likelihood of any federal funding in the near future that could immediately impact this is very unlikely.
I think ultimately we can receive some federal funds, but it will be many, many years into the future. I would say at the very earliest, 10 years from now, but more than likely longer than that, based on our experience. And these funds are drying up a little bit, and it's a great deal of competition among the other cities in the Nashville metropolitan area for these funds. This project is not even in the 2040 regional plan right now, so we'll have to get it in that plan. I think we can. I've already had a conversation with the MPO staff, and I think we can, but the big question is, how long will it take to do that?
Well, and certainly, regardless of what we do about this particular project tonight, we need to be moving towards this project being in that plan. I think we also know from looking at the city budget and some of the discussions that our Board of Mayor and Aldermen have been having, that they are putting an emphasis on road improvements and repaving, but this is not included in that. And we have in the city a tremendous backlog of road improvement needs. We have grown, and then we've grown very rapidly in the last few years, but a reference was made to Brentwood. Unlike Brentwood, we did not make the road improvements consistent, although they have not always done that either. They're just not nearly as far behind as we are in some of that. Also, my understanding that with this particular plan, the density would be much larger than what the current zoning is, estate residential. And also, we are identifying this, or the developer is identifying this as a CSD. However, this commission has not ever established a standard for what a CSD should be. And that's probably something that we should do. They're introducing a great concept, and what they have done in the plan, I think, is very favorable. Yet we really have not established what the standard is, and to me it would make more sense that we establish that standard and then have other projects to meet that standard than to approve a project which then it becomes the standard that we are with at that particular point. I also have a very real concern on the one access point as the planning department has with that. I said this at the last meeting, and I would repeat my comment again, that I think this is it's a beautiful plan. It's an excellent plan in terms of a piece of property and developing something that is very unique and with amenities. I'm sure there are many people that would be very attracted to living in a very attractive area such as this. It is unfortunate, however, that the location of this particular property does place this project really, for me, in jeopardy because of the road conditions. I have certainly been down Saundersville Road many times, but I would have to say in the last 8 or 9 months, as I have been working some with Welch College, I'm down that road quite a bit more. And there are certainly many times of the day, not just early morning in school, although that's a terrible time, that the traffic is currently backed up. It's backed up and issues not only on Saundersville, but Vietnam Vets, people trying to get in, and with the approvals that are already secured for more homes in that area, I am just very concerned about putting this many more homes in this particular area.
May I respond to Mr. Lee's comments? Because I think that we've got some answers that may help you understand. As far as the CSD, the land use plan really gives you the guidelines. It identifies 3 units an acre by virtue of saying there's 900 homes that can be approved on 300 acres, which is what drove our plan. We didn't take it to that level. We felt like 2.51 or 2.57 before removing the 2 cul-de-sacs was appropriate. And we feel like 2.51, being the least dense community on Saundersville Road, is even more appropriate. So I think you have in your land use plan identified to a large degree what your CSD standards are. Now, it doesn't talk about open space, but I think we said earlier there's no litmus test for that. As far as road conditions, without us, there's issues. With us, we bring a solution or part of a solution. As far as the intersection at Lower Station Camp, I've talked with Judy Harden. They're going to be converting that full-way stop to a 2-way stop shortly. It will probably happen this month. That will have continual flow at that intersection, which is a large degree of the backup on Saundersville Road. They didn't want to do it during school hours because they didn't want to intermix that change during those times. So they want people to get used to it over the summer and then have that. So I think that will help. So I think what we bring is a solution to a problem that already exists and will get worse if we're not there. And again, I think by virtue of your land use plan, you have identified that.
Well, I do think there's some road improvements that you have talked about, and certainly Mr. Harrison has addressed, that that does improve some things, but it really doesn't improve all the things. It's sort of like someone that has cardiac arrest and you start an IV or you start oxygen. That's great, but that's not all that you need to do. And so
And I respect that.
and I do commend you for your line of thinking, and I do commend you for looking at how this would improve. But it, the net effect is that it may or may not be the long-term solution that we really need.
But Mr. Lee, I don't, and I understand exactly what you're saying. That one of the reasons for the transportation planning report is indeed to look at every single intersection up and down that corridor and look at, and I just want to say this for the record, even though we've met with staff and we've identified through the engineer that's doing that planning report those specific locations where we need to do improvements. I mean, we're open to the other things that it identifies, and we bring funds along with that. And that we understand and we hear the lack of funds that the city has. We understand that completely, and that's why we think this is an important part of that equation. The thing that Marshall and I have looked at very carefully, and Fred as well, is that the traffic flow out there that we see right now is not going to be what it's, I mean, it's going to grow. We know it's going to grow, and so we know we need to prepare for that. So to use your analogy of the heart attack, we're looking at the entire, at least on that corridor, we're looking at all that entire corridor.
Okay.
So.
Let me move on to Mr. Bristol.
Well, first, I don't know that I have a question anymore, but I will ask Fred. So, in regard to Mr. Harris's statement, as far as, is there some agreement? Because right now, my understanding is any funding would be long-term, far off, but you're saying you've got some immediate solutions. I mean, it seems like we're talking. But we don't have anything present in front of us that says this is a hard solution.
We've submitted to staff, and timing was a little bit of a challenge here. We didn't get the final report until this past Friday as far as the third-party review. So we spent this weekend going through and identifying exactly where those intersections are. We knew pretty well where they were from a standpoint of our traffic study had identified those back in March. But we got that information. Staff was really good about sitting down with us and going through those. So we've identified those, and we specifically have in writing to staff given a per lot fee for the funding of that, identified those short-term locations that have been identified to us by the third-party engineer that we also feel are concerned spots for the next 2 to 4 years, and we have identified that in writing to staff, and that is part of what we're making. And I'll say that for the record, that is part of what we're making as a commitment to dedicate those funds. In our conversations, we don't know the exact final dollar amounts of those funds, but we know the general magnitude of those, and we know that what we are contributing would exceed what's needed to take care of those needs. So that's. I don't know if that answers your question, but...
Well, it's an answer. It probably doesn't answer my question.
Okay, well, I'll try again.
Because the point of the matter is, I don't know what those figures are, and neither of the commissioners have any ability to see that.
They are $1,150 per lot.
Okay, well, that information has been presented, and so
Yes,
when
sir.
you do the math, you're talking about $718,000.
$750,000, yeah, roughly.
Okay, so... Anyway, well, yeah, I'm no road engineer or what have you. I don't know what type of impact. That's a question for staff to handle. I probably would not feel comfortable making a decision based on that information right now. However, I can't speak more eloquently than Dr. Lee. And maybe we've kind of beat this like a dead horse. But as far as the, we've not come upon an opportunity to really talk to a developer about conservation-based subdivisions. To me, it seems like a very interesting approach. I don't know tonight if we're doing you any justice or ourselves, because we've not come upon a CSD like this before. So based on what I hear, your perceptions, because you're at, our staff report tells us that the Planning Commission has the ability to determine what is appropriate for a CSD. And based upon, and again, I think you have a great plan. I think you've got great builders and all that. I'm just not comfortable with the density for a CSD at this location based on the challenges that lie ahead of you. So again, I'm not sure how you come to a point where you go from 2.57 to 2.51 to say how you feel that's an acceptable level when you still have all these challenges as far as density issues, traffic issues, access points, and things like that.
Can I make this comment as well?
Let's go ahead, and then we have more questions too, so we'll get in the queue.
We went in with the CSD because that's what your land use plan overlay is. We could have come in and said, and I'll put it on the floor tonight, we could have asked for a land use amendment. This was a way not to do a land use amendment. Everything around is suburban living, which is also appropriate. In that case, we'd really blow the doors off because we're the least dense, probably suburban. We offer the most open space, but we design based on the CSD with the outline that's in your focus plan, in your land use focus area. Additionally, I don't know that there's any other, Mr. Rogers, you can correct me, other than the Norman Creek East, the 50 lots that's left in a CSD area to even establish a guideline. There might be one other small spot outside your way out boundary on New Shackle, but I don't know that that even exists.
Well, the point that I see here, from what I'm hearing, Mr. Rogers, do you want to respond to that at all?
I probably need to make a couple of comments about the CSD. I guess, first of all, Mike's right. They could apply for an amendment to the land use plan if you should determine that this doesn't meet the CSD. And I think probably the biggest mark against it is that it doesn't have the 50% open space as the plan indicates should be there. But ultimately, it's going to be up to you and the Board of Mayor and Aldermen. If you feel like this is appropriate, again, they could have applied for an amendment to change the rural living designation to suburban living, and then you'd be entitled to approve the SR1 PD. But I will say this, just to be clear, and I mentioned this at the last meeting, I don't want the public to think that this is the city's plan for this property. As I said before, the consultants that performed or prepared our land use and transportation plan simply wanted to show us an example of what a CSD development would be. And they felt like this was just a good piece of property to use to provide that example. That is not to say the consultants were recommending that this type of development be approved on that land. That's ultimately up to this board and the Planning Commission to determine.
Okay. Ms. McCormick.
Okay, so I guess my question is probably more to staff and to Marshall in this regard. I know Mr. Stanton mentioned it in his presentation, but I guess I just want verification from you that I guess he's saying that they are opting for $1,150 per lot. Mm-hmm. Do we have any other money for Saundersville Road, be it from Winbrook, Windcrest, Stonecrest, Masters Glen, Country Hills, Saundersville Station, besides Millstone, any of those other subdivisions? Meaning, if this goes away tonight and they say we withdraw and go about our way, will any of the Saundersville Road residents have any relief from any of those other subdivisions? Do we have any money, period, looking to help this road?
There's a payment in lieu expected for a phase of Stonecrest that has frontage. It's one of the last phases that will touch Saundersville, but that's, I don't know the number of that, but that's the only payment in lieu that we have for the remaining segment of Saundersville. And it won't, I mean, the amount we expect to get, it really won't compare to what we would get from Forest Park.
Yes, so when we're talking about building roads in Hendersonville or repairing roads, this is something as an alderman that we've been going over with the budget, and it's probably one of our hugest expenses. When we're talking about building a road, what would you say a mile of mill curb and road costs, about $80,000 to $90,000 a mile? Much, much more. So for just strict paving,
One example. Sorry. One example of Volunteer Drive, the project we just finished. We were widening an existing road, putting in curb and gutter and sidewalk in some areas. It was 1.5 million.
for a complete build out.
It will for
Curb and gutter, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it would, in reality, it'd be much more than that because we reused portions of that road.
Right, so when we're repaving our roads, what is that costing a mile? Like if we're approximately?
I
I'm
think
not trying to put you on the spot.
Well, I think the 80 to 90,000 might be
Okay, so
closer.
just for
Just for the
repaving. Yeah.
Just for repaving.
So that just kind of gives an idea of what we're looking at from a city, trying to keep everybody's taxes down and also provide funding for infrastructure. It's very challenging to find that money for road improvements. I think this year we're looking at 1.5 to 2 million that we're going to have to bond to get onto paving. So I don't know how far $750,000 will go. I didn't quite understand what your short-term plan was for road improvements.
They would be specifically identified to 3 intersections, maybe 4. There's a 4th one that we need to check out that the city consultant had not done counts on, and we hadn't either. But there's 3 specifically that we know need improvements. They would mainly be to widen the left-hand turn lanes on Saundersville Road at those intersections, and then make sure that you have 2 full lanes so that right turn and left turn traffic can empty out from those existing subdivisions. They're primarily Saundersville Station and Winbrook in those areas. Cannon Crossing, I won't remember all the names, but Windcrest Trace, I think, is one of them. But the bottom line is we have a specific list that identifies those. We don't know exactly what that's going to be. There's a little bit of utility relocation. I would expect that just roughly looking at the cost that you're talking about somewhere between 100,000, 200,000, somewhere in that neighborhood. I think when Mr. Rogers asked me, I was saying it was around 20% that I felt like of that per contribution that we were making that we would need to spend at those locations. There will be a certain portion of this, and a certain portion of that $1,150 is paid by the developer, and we would expect a bigger chunk of that to come in first as part of phase 1, and that would allow you to go in and get on the ground at some of those intersections and do some of that. But part of what I was saying with the transportation planning report is it's going to identify where the final ultimate section for the bigger project needs to go so that we can put those improvements in the correct location. So it's going to give us some information that we need to know about putting those improvements in the right place so that it's beneficial for the long term for the city.
As stated earlier, the city's transportation planning report has not been completed. We have a general idea of what it will cost to make the improvements, but we don't know yet. We really need to determine what that cost will be, and we probably need to look at the improvements that would be made in the interim, the short-term improvements would be made, and then hear from our traffic engineer as to what the level of service would be, what is it now, and what will it, let's say, decrease to as more development occurs until we can expect to receive the federal funds. Like, in other words, in 10 years, even with the intersection improvements you're speaking of, what would be the level of service as compared to now? What would be the level of service in 15 years, 20 years, et cetera? So I think those are the type of numbers that we need, that we would be getting from the transportation planning report once it's completed.
Part of what Marshall and I have gone through, and part of what the city's engineer for the transportation planning report has gone through is a projection looking at not only the TDOT counts, but looking at the expected increase that we'd see in traffic along Saundersville Road, looking at the timing of that 5 years out, 10 years out, 15 years out, but then also looking at how those homes come online, because the homes come online unequally at each intersection in a different way. The couple of the intersections in there, you've got 200 more homes that are coming online for those intersections. And so those have a much bigger impact. I'll say this, the one that I'm thinking about, which is Cannon's Crossing, actually has a wide enough section, it has a wide enough paved section that it's probably okay with just some striping on that particular street. But up on Saundersville Road, it's not. That's where you need some improvements for that intersection where it's coming up onto Saundersville Road. And that's what these funds give you, is that ability to fund that and pay for that, because those subdivisions, as Marshall mentioned earlier, do not have any contribution that's going towards anything to take care of this.
Okay, are there any other questions? Okay, let me just kind of weigh in for a couple seconds here, and then we need to hone in on a motion on what we want to do.
I had one question.
Okay, thank you.
If you don't mind.
Yes.
The sticking issue here seems to be the road improvements. Are you guys willing to do anything additional to kind of, I mean, these folks have legitimate concerns and they're legitimate road issues. $750,000 isn't a drop in the bucket. I mean, I've been in the construction business for almost 30 years. So is there anything else you guys think you could do? Because at this point, I'm not comfortable with this project for these folks that live out there and the additional traffic. Is there anything else that you think you guys could do? Because I think that's going to be a deal breaker.
And I'll let Mike follow up here, but the $1,150 per lot is not a number that we just came up with. It was a number that was recently approved on Norman Creek, very recently, within the last year, for their dedication. It was a number that was used on Durham Farm as well. So that, now,
I don't
let me
really care
say-
about Norman Creek.
No, well, let me.
I care
let me-
about what we're talking about tonight, and these
part-
folks have a legitimate issue.
I understand.
So but my question is, are you willing to do anything additional? And I'm trying to help you out here, just so you
No, I
know.
understand, and
Because these folks need some relief.
And let me say this, part of what the condition is we are going to build out sections along the frontage at our intersection. We are doing studies. We are doing that alongside of what the city is doing with the transportation planning report. We are doing some things extra. So it's, I don't know, Mike may want to talk about that.
Let me weigh in on that. Jim is right. We use that number, and I'm with you. It's a number that who knows where it comes from and what it does. We would make this commitment that, this body obviously votes on do we meet the technicalities. As we go through the political process, there's going to be more work done with the traffic report. It's going to be honing in on what those costs are. We're willing to step up to the plate and be willing to do more than the $1,150. We just can't speak to a number right now because we don't know what the cost is. But if I'm saying publicly, we're willing to go beyond the $1,150, and we can work through, if we get through a vote tonight, we'll work with BOMA to make sure that we can work with you. And Ms. Petrelli, I know you're on the BOMA board. We'll work with staff, we'll work with engineering, and we'll do our very best. And if that number doesn't work, BOMA votes us down and we all go away. But I'm standing here committing tonight that I understand the 1150 is a number that's been used in the past. We're willing to go beyond that. We understand there's a need. We understand there's a big need without us. But we're the only person on Saundersville Road, the only developer that's come in and said we do anything, and the only developer that's paid any fees, other than the one that Marshall just mentioned, and that's just been a recent approval. So on the record, we are willing, if we can get through a vote tonight, to work the political process, to work through the transportation report, and identify what those costs are.
Well, I'm not being critical. I'm telling you that there's an issue here, and that I'm not speaking for any of the other commissioners. I'm only speaking for myself. But where we are isn't going to work. So we've got to get to somewhere else if you guys want to make this work out. And that's where I'm trying to get to, a compromise. So if we could just think about that, and I'll
Okay.
Welcome any of the other commissioners.
Okay, thank you,
Well,
Ms. Ashley.
Mr. Chairman, I would say the issue that Ms. Ashley has brought up was really the issue why we delayed the last time.
Right.
Because we did not know what road improvements from an independent engineer for the city were needed and how much they would cost. And the developer at the last meeting agreed, well, we'll make any improvements that we can. Well, the improvements are likely going to be $8 or $10 million. I mean, and I don't know that the developer's willing, or higher than that. And the contribution that the developer is willing to make is the fee when it's built out over 8 to 10 years. And I mean, we're going to be waiting a long time for those improvements. So it's unfortunate, but we really don't know any more tonight to make the decision than we did a month ago.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. Before I turn it over to Mr. Millsaps, a couple of things here. The thing I do like about what they're trying to do here is that we've identified the problems in terms of the traffic, and at least we're trying to grapple with a plan on how to fix it. But the issue that we have is that many of these improvements that are going to be in the millions of dollars to do to encompass everything are things that will have to be done on the BOMA level, simply because it involves money and it involves funding. And when you start talking about MPO, when you start talking about all these types of things, there has to be a lot of give and take on that budgeting. They talked about the incremental houses that will come online over a period of years, and how it's not all going to impact once. However, I would say still that we have an issue where there's just a lot of givens here that are unknowns, rather, that are not there, and they would have to be devised and worked through at another level in terms of how this traffic plays out. With regard to density, we could parse that one with regard to the suburban areas and with regard to the in and out, the access point. We could debate that. But I think that what I'm hearing from this commission is more about traffic issues than anything else, and those are issues that we simply I applaud the applicant for coming to the plate and saying that here we've got a developer that wants to help take care of the issue. I don't think they can buy the whole road, but they want to step up. However, the question is do we move forward? So, Mr. Millsap, I'm going to hand it over to you, but tonight we have the option of recommending approval. You could do that. Or you could recommend approval with conditions, which would, for traffic's sake or the contingent upon traffic issues being worked out, you could do that. Or we could recommend denial. And even in that case, even if we recommend denial, as you certainly know, I mean, the applicant at that point very well could go on in light of our denial and pursue this with BOMA at any point. So, Mr. Millsaps.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One of the things that I was going to ask you to do was what you just did, which is kind of go over our options so that the commission would be have a fresh recollection as well as our guests and our fellow citizens. I get it's kind of hard to say what I'm getting ready to say to you folks because you're not here a lot. I probably am as proud of this commission as and we've had a bunch of high moments in the last, I don't know, 12, 13 years I've been on this commission. But I commend my colleagues for the thoughtfulness and the thoroughness of the questions that they posed. And I think, as a matter of fact, it helped clear some things in my own mind. I sat here and listened to all this, and I was reminded of my late father, who was kind of a country fella and proud of it. And he had a saying one time that it took my brother and I a little while to catch up on. He says, "Boys, have you ever noticed that the hurrier we get, the behinder we get?" And we seem to be on a well-intentioned foot race here. And you probably got 15 or 20 options, of which 15 or 20 that are, some of them are bad and some of them are good and some of them ought to be forgot. But we've got to make a decision. And so, Mr. Chairman, to test the will of this commission, I move that we send this matter to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen with the recommendation that they summarily deny it. Please.
Hold on, I've got a motion on the floor. I need to,
I second that motion.
we have a second, we have discussion. At this point, Mr. Stanton, I don't think we're in the middle of parliamentarian stuff here, and so we've got a motion, a second on the floor. It's the property of this commission. So commissioners, do you have any more discussion on this?
I do.
Okay, Ms. Atchley.
Do you have any counteroffer on the road improvements?
Yes,
Okay.
I do.
Point of order, Mr.
Point of
Chairman.
order.
The discussion is over, and the motion, well,
We can discuss.
we can discuss, but we can discuss among ourselves. I don't think we can discuss with the developer.
Oh, I can ask you a question.
Mic on. Ms. Atchley was very gracious when she asked if the developer had any kind of proposal, and of course, they really can't answer that. They said they would step up. So in a sense, I believe they have answered, but they're not in a position to give us real numbers tonight because we don't know what the real numbers are. So, we do have a motion on the floor, and we have a second. And so from a parliamentary...
Robert's Rules of Order, I certainly have a right to ask the developer the question, sir, Chairman,
You can ask your question. Go ahead.
which was, are they willing to make a counteroffer on the road improvements? That was my question. Simple enough.
Here's the answer. We would like, just discussed, we don't know the number. We'd like to defer. Applicant would like to defer to further work with staff to determine what those numbers could be. Since we can't come to a number, if you had a number that you could tell me, I mean, because I don't know the number.
How about 2250 a lot?
Mr. Chairman.
No, let me just stop.
3250. I don't know. I don't know the number.
Okay.
But you're at the point of deferral or denial. That's where we are.
Yeah, and I'm submitting, I'd like to defer
So moved.
to work this out.
So moved, Chairman.
We
Point of
can't.
order, there's a motion
There's a
on the
motion
floor.
We got a motion and a second on the floor.
Yeah.
I need everybody just to cool your jets for a second. We're going to get through this. Okay, we have a motion and a second to deny, and we're going to take a vote. And at that point, we'll see how the will of the commission is, and we'll go from there. All right? If it is denied, this developer has the right to go to BOMA and take this matter to them. Okay? Mr. Rogers, before we...
I'm not a parliamentarian, but I'm looking for somebody that might be a parliamentarian, but I'm thinking back to board meetings, and sometimes after a motion and a second, there's a motion to amend the motion. I don't know if that's a possibility or not.
That is a possibility, but we have to, the motion to amend has to have one of the makers be a part of that, I think, too. So,
No.
Can we have discussion yet?
no, go ahead.
I'm finding myself in an unusual position as the maker of this motion, folks. It may not mean anything to you, surely didn't mean a lot to a lot of people when I did it, but I spent 12 years as chief clerk of the House of Representatives of the state of Tennessee. Part of that job was being the chief parliamentarian. Part of that job involved having a very complete knowledge and understanding and history of Robert's Rules of Order. As I said, I find myself in somewhat of an embarrassing and questionable position. But the question has been asked.
It's been seconded, needs to be voted on.
When a motion is made and a second is made, that stops all debate.
That's right.
Wait, now please. Folks, the reason the chairman has been insistent about trying to keep things down is decorum is one of the things that causes all of us as citizens to have confidence in the seriousness of all of us who serve. There could be a motion to amend the motion. That's very clear in Roberts, very clear. But once that motion is acted on, then it goes to the motion, the original motion,
Right.
as amended. Mr. Chairman, are you comfortable with that?
We do not,
explanation?
we really do not have, unless Ms. Ashley has got an amendment to the motion to deny. Have you got an amendment for that? Then we'll vote on the amendment.
Keith?
Well, I just wanted to comment. I mean, we were still in the discussion phase of the initial motion, so I would have liked to comment on the motion before we move to amend, but if we're going to amend.
If it's for the purpose to amend,
Yeah.
you have.
Yeah, so you have the right.
You have the right to speak.
You have the right to speak if you want to speak to the motion to deny.
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
All right,
And
so
we'll
my
come-
comment
then we'll
was
come back to the
basically,
motion to amend, so.
my comment was to the motion to deny, essentially. I guess for me, I kind of feel like it's unfair for us to approve or deny. We asked specifically for a traffic study independently and results of that study, which is why we deferred to tonight. We're not in any better position tonight than we were a month ago. So to me, we're acting prematurely no matter what. We trusted and asked for an independent study, and we don't have that. We have no more results now than we did before. So if the applicant's asking for a deferment, I feel like it benefits everybody for us to have complete information. And that information was based on what we asked for last time in the first place. So we asked for information, we're waiting for information, we don't have information, and we're going to act without the information that we asked for from the beginning. And that just doesn't feel quite right when we asked for it ourselves. So it almost feels like the deferral kind of works in everybody's benefit for us to actually get the information and make a truly educated decision.
Thank you, Ms. McCormick. Now, Ms. Atchett, do you have a motion to amend?
I withdraw my motion.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. All right, we do not have a motion to amend. Any more discussion?
Question.
Call on the question. All in favor for the motion to deny, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
Okay, let's do it one more time. All in favor of the motion to deny, please say aye. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Okay. Motion to no, 2, 3, 4. 4. So it's 4 against and,
It's 42. 42. The motion failed.
motion to deny failed. Okay?
42.
But 4 to 2. Yeah. 4 to 3, I'm sorry. All right. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we need for you just to hold steady. Okay, the motion to deny failed. Do you have another motion?
I do.
It would have taken we've got 8 members here, 8 members, and it was 4-4. It was tied. So, if the chairman cast his vote, so. All right. So we don't have a vote here. So we need another solution.
Who are the 4 that voted to deny?
At this point, the motion failed.
But we have a right to know who voted for what. It wasn't clear. It wasn't clear. I want a roll call. Who voted for what? That's fair.
Okay, you know what? We've taken the motion. We got four.
No, you do. Show of hands. You have not. I didn't hear 4-4. I heard a lot more people deny. All I'm asking for the names.
We have a right to know how you vote.
I'm going to, okay, if you'll just stop a second. Let's redo this vote. Let's so that you'll know.
Show of hands, please.
The motion to deny failed, but we will, for clarity, for our secretaries, those who are in favor to deny, would you please raise your hand? 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay? Those who are in favor not to deny, or against the motion to deny, please raise your hands. It's 4-4. Okay? Now you know. Thank you very much. All right. Now, so we have 2 other options before us. We really are, Mr. Rogers, we really can't send this forth with no recommendation, can we?
Correct. There must be a recommendation, or the applicant could request a deferral. You could accept that request, or you could actually vote to defer, either way.
Okay.
But any vote to defer on your part would have to be with the agreement of the applicant, since we're beyond the 45 days.
Yes, and we're asking for deferral for the reasons, Key, you said exactly what should have been said. We don't have the answers, and I can give you an answer, because we were relying on the city to provide something that's still not complete.
Okay, Mr. Corman.
Yeah.
In an effort to move this forward, I move that we allow the applicant to defer as we wait for the study that we requested at the previous meeting.
All right, do you want to put a time frame on that?
When do you guys expect it?
Did we know how long?
Oh, well,
Marshall?
I can, they've given us some information. It's not complete. And I don't know, another month they may be able to complete analyzing the entire corridor, looking at each intersection and coming up with a cost for that work. I don't know yet, but I'll find out tomorrow.
Are you ready for July's meeting?
I'll find out tomorrow.
So can my motion be, I hate to make it very open-ended, but for it not to be put on our agenda until this is complete, until the study is complete?
You can state that motion.
All right, so I move that we allow the applicant to defer and wait on the study that we requested, and for it to be placed on our agenda when said study is complete.
second.
Okay, got a motion, a second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Mr. Chairman, just as a point, and in terms of discussion, I think we all know that the cost of these road improvements are going to be in the millions of dollars, not $750,000. And I really feel like it's almost a crime to require citizens to keep coming here and participating, and they deserve an answer just like the developer deserves an answer. And we're not the final decision on this anyway. Really the decision with the mayor, board, and aldermen, they're the ones that have the funds that can look at road improvements and can say, yes, if the developer can do this, then we can do this and make some of the improvements that would make that work. So I'm going to be voting against the motion only because I feel like we know what We don't know everything, but we know a whole lot of what we need to know.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. Okay, we have a motion to defer pending the traffic report being done, put on the agenda. Mr. Millsap.
Mr. Chairman, I'd request a roll call vote, please.
Okay. Call the roll, please.
Okay. Ms. Stringfellow?
Motion to defer. Yes?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Ms. Petrelli?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Millsaps?
No.
Mr. David, sorry.
Yes.
Mr. Jenkins? Ms. McCormick?
Yes.
Mr. I'm sorry. Mr. Bristol, I'm sorry.
No, it's just to abstain.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
No.
All right.
Count.
I have. Mr. Jenkins, can I repeat?
Yes.
Were you yes? Okay.
Yes, yes.
Okay. I have 1 abstention, 2 deny, and that would be 4, 5, I'm sorry, 5. Yep.
Motion passes, and so you are deferred.
Thank you, sir.
Let's take a recess for 5 minutes. We need something. All right. All right. I'd like to call the meeting back to order. Okay.
Hey.
We're going to continue on now with next item on our agenda, and that is the Meridian. And Mr. Rogers, we'll let you begin.
Okay, just a little background, primarily for any of you who may not have attended the last meeting on the Meridian. The first, I think we have a PowerPoint presentation here. Someone had taken our computer that's always up here, and we had to scramble a little bit to get another computer. But the first slide here is the first plan that was submitted for the Goodall property on the corner of Stop 30 and Jones Lane. And this development was to consist of townhomes and condos. Townhomes like you see on the right top, and condos, stacked flat condos, as you see on the bottom. I think the density was 7 point something. And that was submitted back in January. The Planning Commission denied or recommended denial of that proposal. And the applicant chose to withdraw and not go forward to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen. And then the second submittal, which is the submittal that's now before you, is the submittal called the Meridian, also on the Goodall property in the place of what would have been Stratton down south. And this plan is for townhomes, like you see on the right, on both photos on the right. And then also in the south part of the development would be office buildings. And I don't think we have any photos of those office buildings, but that's the plan. And then not to forget, the third application on Stop 30 Road was an application submitted back in the spring for Meritage Builders to build townhomes on the west end of the Davidson Academy property, which is there on the south side of Stop 30 west of Drakes Creek Road. I think the density likewise is in the 7 or 8 range. So we have 2 active applications remaining Meridian is on the agenda tonight. The Meritage development is not on because they have requested a deferral pending the traffic study and the cost estimates. So just to be clear, by law, the Planning Commission has 45 days from the public hearing to act on these applications. Deferrals by the applicants extend the allowed time, and that's what's happened in this particular case thus far. So these three plans do not conform to the current zoning, and that's, of course, the reason that we're here tonight. They have made a request to rezone the property. So what I'd like to do, first of all, is to take a look at the current zoning. What is that current zoning? As I said, it doesn't conform to the current zoning, so they've asked for for a rezoning. These colors bleed just a little bit, but primarily the current zoning is ER and SR1. The lighter yellow, I believe, is the ER, which is a state residential, which is for one home per acre. And then the darker yellow is the SR1, which allows 3 homes per acre. And I'll now ask Keith to go through the next slide that tells us what that would result in as far as the number of units based on current zoning.
Oh,
It's on.
It was on.
now it's off.
There you go.
One of the things that we wanted to look at on the existing zoning and try to kind of project that out based on the existing zoning, what could possibly be the density or how many homes or the mix of development that could occur. With the existing zoning, with the SR1 and the ER, it looks like that would be about 772 homes on about 373 acres. And that would be about a little over 2 units an acre on what that would average out to be. And then just estimating like 2.2 persons per household, just kind of get a rough idea of what the population increase would be about 2,160.
Thank you, Keith. And to be clear, this is not just for the Goodall property and the Meritage property. This is for all currently vacant parcels along Stop 30, all the way from just to orient you on this map, if I can make this work. So here we are, Stop 30 at New Shackle Island Road, and we continue east and go past the Davidson Academy property and past Lawson Point, and we cross Drakes Creek Road and continue down past the Catholic Church to the curve where Jones Lane is located, and then Stop 30 crosses 386 and then dead ends into Sonsville Road. So this is the corridor that we're speaking of, the entire length of Stop 30 Road. So the next map depicts the current land use plan. This is the plan for the entire city and the urban growth boundary. And go to the next slide. The next slide is a blow up of the Stop 30 corridor. And here you'll see that there are primarily 2 designations. The lighter yellow, the light yellow is suburban living, and the brown area is, that part of the brown area is office. That's the part that's north of the bypass and east of Drakes Creek Road. And then on the far west end, over there by New Shackle, I believe that's designated as a regional activity center, not limited just to office. The part east of Drakes Creek Road is limited to office only in the brown. And just to explain, the state law which authorizes the city to impose zoning restrictions also requires that the city first develop a land use plan. So the first map we saw was the existing zoning. This is the land use plan, the existing land use plan for the corridor. The zoning map is based on this land use plan, and the land use plan guides rezoning decisions, which is the request that is before this commission at this time. The neighbors have an expectation to rely on the current zoning. The landowner has an expectation to rely on the land use plan. But with the understanding that it must be proven that the other criteria for rezoning have been satisfied, and namely, that deals with the timing that we've talked about in previous meetings, and that relates to whether or not there is a need for the uses requested, and whether or not the infrastructure is in place or can be put in place to accommodate the uses, and also it deals with the issue of compatibility with surrounding land use. So the current land use plan that you see before you for Stop 30 is, as you can see, is very general, and it's very flexible, perhaps too flexible. It provides for the possibility of a very wide range of density for residential uses and intensity in regard to office uses. In other words, the current plan would allow for a very a large amount of homes or townhomes, and also for a large amount of office space. And this chart indicates what those densities are for the suburban living area, and you'll see that, and this is for the regional activity portion, which is the office portion. So just to try to speed through this thing, the suburban living areas, the Planning Commission could approve up to 15 units per acre. Anyone would have the right to apply for up to 15 units per acre. On the part that's designated as the Regional Activity Center, which is the brown part, they could apply for office buildings with a floor area ratio of up to 2, which is a lot of office buildings. So that's the current plan. And this is, of course, led to the submittals that are before the Commission right now. And as I said earlier, there's a lot more vacant land out there for which we could receive applications. So the current plan, as I said, could result in a very high level of development. And at this time, I would like Keith to explain exactly how much development could occur based on the minimum that the plan allows as well as the maximum the plan allows. Keith?
Yeah. What we'll do is we'll looking at that future land use plan that Fred was talking about. It kind of has that variance of kind of the low end of development and then the high end of what development could possibly be. So what we're going to look at right here is just like we looked on that other chart with existing zoning on how many houses you could build. We're going to look at the same thing, looking at sort of the minimum zoning for the existing future land use map, and then also we're going to look at what the maximum zoning could be. You can see here that the majority of this property is SR1, and then all of this that appears here as purple is actually office, and that's sort of the minimum future land use zone. And then over here where it looks a little bit brown, that's kind of a mixed commercial zone. Well, looking at those potential uses, that's not what it's zoned today, but that's what the future land use map says it potentially could be rezoned to. And when we look at that, and we're going to compare all these at the very end that we're going to be going through, but looking at that, then that could produce 753 residential units, and on 270 acres, about 103 acres of total office, and no retail, and then that would consist of about 2.79 dwelling units per acre with about 2,108 people. It's somewhat similar to what the existing zoning has. It just changes where it has some office use that is allowed within there. The next area here is looking also at that existing future land use plan that we have approved, looking at what could the max be, because we looked at the low end. Now let's look at what the high end of that would be. As you can see, all of this is showing up in different shades of brown, and the areas here with a little bit a darker brown, those are all multifamily residential, which would be townhomes or could be apartments, could be townhomes at a pretty high density. And also all of this kind of lighter brown, that would all be office use. And then this just right over here, just this little triangle, would be mixed commercial. So when we look at that, on what the existing future land use map would possibly allow. We haven't approved anything, to this level of density, and none of the projects that we've looked at are anywhere near this. But when we look at that, then we're looking just in that area that we've defined on the map along Stop 30. We're looking at 1,823 residential units on 270 acres, and about 86 acres of office space and about 17 acres of retail space. And that gives us a lot higher dwelling units per acre, and that gets us up closer to 7 at 6.75 units per acre. And then just the estimated population based on just those units would be around 4,000.
Okay. Thank you, Keith. So, because the current plan allows such a wide range of density and intensity, and because it's basically impossible to determine how many lanes we would need for Stop 30 Road, we really need to refine the land use plan and probably bring it down in terms of density and intensity. And so, with that in mind, we, as with the last project, the Public Works Department and the city engineer have hired a traffic engineer to prepare a transportation planning report for the entire Stop 30 corridor. And we have given them this land use scenario to work with. And I will say this, just to begin with, this scenario, this land use scenario, is less residential density and less office space than the current plan. And again, I'll ask Keith to give the numbers.
This is just looking at what we talked about before, was the existing low and the existing high, and now we're trying to look at in defining what size of a road we would need and what kind of density might be allowed. We're trying to look at what is a potential new low and a potential new high, just so we can get kind of a starting point with this. So when we look at this, we look at the primary permitted uses, which would be things maybe we would like to see there, but not limited to these things. Let me start over here where this is kind of purple. That's kind of office. This yellow area would be SR1 PD, which would be single-family homes, which would also allow for, which is allowed now in SR1. You could have 25% of those that could be townhomes, but 75% would be single-family homes if it was a planned development.
And what's the density on that, Keith, for the SR1?
The SR1 density, I think it was three units an acre, I think is what it worked out to be. And we're going to go over what that density is overall for this. And then this area that looks kind of brown right here, that would be MXC PD, which could have a variety of office and potential retail uses or mixed use kind of development. And then right here on this corner, that was office plan development. The same thing here where this purple area is. And then these areas here would be, this would be sort of single-family residential, estate residential, maybe around Jones Lane area, and then maybe like a SR2, kind of a single-family residential within that area. And then this Galloway property that's here, that would be a SR1, sort of a single-family development or zoning classification. Now, when we look at that and we compare this to the others, then we see this particular new draft of what the low future land use map might be. Under this scenario would be 882 residential units on 288 acres with 60 acres of office and 25 acres of retail. And then this works out to about close to 3.1 on the units per acre across the whole Stop 30 area. The estimated number of people associated with this, although you do have more retail and more office, but the people living there would be around 1,940. Then the next one, now we're looking at a draft of what maybe the high end, and we call that the secondary permitted uses. When we look at that to see, well, if it fully developed out at some higher density but lower than what we have, right now with the future land use map, as we look at that, then this area is kind of a mixed commercial area,
And all of these yellow areas are pretty much still maintained as single family. And then this little darker area, that would be where Fred was talking about the Davidson Academy Meritage Homes, where they were looking at the townhomes. Something like that would be multifamily that might allow townhomes, right there, for example. And within this brown area here, that would be the same as it was before, would just be kind of a mixed-use commercial area, but could be retail, could be hotel right there. I think it, or could be under that scenario.
Let me take a
Yeah,
minute
go
to
ahead.
explain this area here. This is near the intersection of Drakes Creek Road. I know this map is difficult to read, but this is the bypass, and this is Drakes Creek Road going right through here, crossing stop 30. So if you recall from driving out there, as you drive north and you cross the bypass, on the left there's a large vacant parcel, and obviously, it's right there on the bypass. It does not even touch stop 30 because the creek is right in here. So that property obviously is not suitable for single-family residential purposes. I think we would all agree to that. Likewise,
If you'll suspend, folks, please, let's let Mr. Rogers finish. Thank you.
Likewise, at the intersection, you'll note there is a tract there that's for sale. That too, it's not feasible or to think that anyone would build single-family homes on that lot on the corner. And then even the piece across the road, there could be the possibility there for a daycare center or maybe some office buildings. And then likewise on this other property over here, I know more than likely the church at Indian Lake will remain there forever, but that is a large parcel. There is a potential at some point in time that could redevelop. So we felt like we should take a look at some non-residential uses for this area right in here. Now let me mention this because we all know this intersection floods, but just to be sure you all understand, the city is in the process of improving this intersection. We have already hired the engineer. The engineer has completed the plans. They've gone through the NEPA process. We're ready to start acquiring right-of-way, and construction will probably start sometime next year. That project will extend the 5-laning of Indian Lake Boulevard up to and through the intersection. First of all, it will raise it out of the flood zone. It will raise this entire intersection out of the flood zone, and it will be 5 lanes to and through the intersection of stop 30, and there will also be turn lanes in an east and west direction. You've already seen the temporary signal. That'll be replaced with a permanent signal. So bottom line is those improvements would be able to accommodate some non-residential development in this area. It's just something to consider. It is a possibility. Again, if you were the landowner, you're going to say that it's absolutely impossible to even think of developing single family in some of these areas. Maybe townhomes or something in this area, but otherwise impossible to develop single family.
Okay.
So Keith, proceed with the
Yes.
I think the next chart.
Yeah. And so looking at that, and keep in mind that what we're talking about is just we talked about what we have right now with the existing future land use map, that high and that low, and we're trying to get something to start a conversation about maybe we need to adjust that so that we don't have such high for potential density of development like we do now in the existing future land use map. What it would do in this particular one, it would create potentially 1,554 residential units on 288 acres and have about 43 acres of office space and have about 42 acres of retail space. And the total dwelling units per acre would be 5.4, which is still high. It's lower than what it is now, but it's higher than what that kind of low end of the draft that we just talked about. And then that would, under that particular scenario of the high end, would create about a population of about 3,400 folks out there within that area.
Now, let me say this. We, as I said, we've hired the traffic engineer. they've not completed the study. We met with them a day or so ago, and we have some preliminary indication that would tell us that it's no way we're going to be able to afford the improvements we would need for that secondary scenario. So if we can go back to that primary scenario,
There we go.
that's the one that really is on the table now, and we've asked the traffic engineer to give us an idea of what type of improvements would be necessary and what that would cost. So again, as with the previous matter, the transportation planning report is not yet complete, so we cannot come to you at this point in time with a firm land use and transportation plan that mesh what, as Mr. Millsap said earlier, you get in a hurry and you tend to get further behind. So staff would propose that we slow down on this, that we take a couple of months to do some more research. I think as a minimum we need to probably have some neighborhood meetings. We need to confirm that water, sewer, and other utilities are available and adequate to serve whatever scenario we come up with. We need to discuss development with the schools. We probably need to check with TDOT in regard to plans to convert Vietnam veterans from a 4-lane to a 6-lane. There's actual talks already of widening Vietnam veterans to a 6-lane, and we need to talk to them about whether or not there would be the noise walls that you see along some of the other interstates. That would have a big bearing on what type of uses would be feasible along the bypass. So those are that's information that we need to gather. In the meantime, the transportation planning report could be completed. We would know what the cost of improvements would be, and we would be able to possibly develop a funding plan which the city and/or the developers can afford. So I think this would probably, if we take a couple of more months to research and gather information and complete the transportation planning report and then have some public meetings with the neighbors, we're probably looking at this thing coming back to you over in the fall.
Thank you, Mr. Rogers. I think that revisiting the land use plan once you have all the data in front of you is a good thing. And I think that when we adopted the land use plan, this was several years back now, that we probably looked at this area and it might not be a bad idea for us to relook at it. And so we've got a level that we're going to start with, and that'll give us a good starting point that we can come back and revisit this land use plan. And I think the neighborhood meetings would be great. And so I would encourage staff to go ahead and let's pull the trigger and make it and begin to put a calendar down on how we can do that. And of course, involving all of our citizens from the Stop 30 Road area, that would be really good. So I'm appreciative of that. Let's move on now to the Meridian, and we do have that before us tonight. Who's got the report, or who wants to handle the report on the Meridian?
Well, I think at this point in time, we may want to hear from the applicant to see if they have any further input.
All right. Okay.
Hello again. I'm Hillary with Goodall Homes. I really feel like I should just say thank you for staying so late, and I know y'all heard me talk more than probably 2 or 3 times, so just really appreciate y'all being so active in the process. When we came last month, y'all shared the vision for coming up with the new corridor study plan, and at this point, we presented an original plan where we were going to amend the land use plan because we felt like residential uses on our property would be the highest and best for the community. We were denied, saying we weren't following the land use plan that y'all had worked on. So that's where we came back with the townhome and office plan. And after meeting with many of the residents one-on-one and community meetings, the office plan just does not seem compatible with what's currently in the area. So we've gone back, we've come up with a few more conceptual plans. I know at the last planning commission I mentioned that we have a few other home collections that we could also build here. We can work with the Jones Lane folks and make single family only on Jones Lane. We could create a separate community and have active adult, which those folks use water, they use infrastructure much less, as Mike had mentioned earlier in the Forest Park comment. So those are things we are more than happy to look at doing, as well as contributing funds to improving the existing infrastructure. So I think we look to y'all to give us that land use plan, that more specific land use plan with that recommendations for traffic improvement, so we can make a better plan, a better informed decision.
Okay, having said that, on this particular submittal that we have here tonight for the townhomes and the office building, are you prepared to withdraw that plan at this juncture?
If that's y'all's recommendation, I'm prepared to do that.
Okay, I think if you withdraw, if you're going to submit something else that has more single family on it, especially in light of what we're fixing to do here, if you wanted to wait until that, as a matter of fact, you know, since you own some land out there, being a part of the process along with the citizens, that this group is driving the staff as far as land use, that might be even more helpful as well.
Sure. Could we propose that we defer until we have the land use plan back?
We can propose that, but I think that in this particular situation, since you are going to propose a new plan at some point, it really doesn't help us to defer it. I think if you withdraw, it accomplishes the same thing, and then when you're ready to submit, you could submit.
Okay. All right. Well, then we will withdraw.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So what this means, folks, is the plan that was before you that we're voting on tonight with Meridian, with office buildings, has been withdrawn. And where that leaves us now is we'll proceed forward with the restudying of the Stop 30 corridor. And when the traffic study comes online, we will get some community meetings lined up and have what essentially is the process of relooking at Stop 30 corridor and trying to come up with a set of values of how we want to proceed with development over north of the bypass. Because I think going forward, and you know, once again, I think most everybody knows that we're a stake owner over there. We have a church over there, Cross Life Community Church, and we want to be good neighbors, and we also want to be responsible. But at the same time, you know, we have to, as citizens, come together and say, we got growth coming our way. How do we best look at this, and how do we responsibly look at it, so that in the future, when submittals come before us, that we don't have what we have, exhibited sometimes here. And I understand that. I understand the outrage. I understand the essence of how we can get to this point. But what we're trying to do, and I want to commend Fred and I want to commend Keith for helping us to rethink this particular area of Stop 30 Road and taking a proactive approach as stakeholders in that area. So thank you, Hillary, for withdrawing, and we'll be talking more. You'll be talking with staff. Okay?
May I make a comment?
Ms. Petrelli, and I want to apologize. I've been calling you Ms. Pirelli. My glasses weren't on here, so go ahead.
It's okay. Thank you. I've been waiting for 2 meetings to speak to this project. I'm right here. Yeah. And I realized it was just withdrawn, but I just want to give my philosophy on what I feel about this corridor. I've spoken about it with Fred briefly. I think this is a very unique part of Hendersonville. With the zoning being rural residential and estate residential, it's one of the last jewels in Hendersonville with this size lots, making it very unique. Coming from an architectural background, having done some planning, I'm very concerned about any type of commercial going into this area. And I just want to be able to say that publicly at a meeting so that folks know where I'm at. Because to me, we have what I would call a natural boundary, which was man-made, which is 386. But as we start jumping that and continue to jump that, we're creating sprawl in Hendersonville. And we are a suburban area. So while I do feel that I think you all have done a very thoughtful job in putting this future land use plan together, I've also asked that there be a joint meeting with planning, with the planning director and the alderman, because as aldermen, we get a lot of input as to zoning. And I think to avoid keep repeating this cycle that we're on, where you all come out, we take the time, as Fred said, and really look at this future land use plan, hash it all out, and make decisions that benefit Hendersonville. But thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Petrilli. Okay. All right, having done that, let's move now to item number 14 on the agenda, other. It's withdrawn. Jimmy, it's been withdrawn.
It's not about that. It's not about that.
No,
Nothing to do with that. The comment I'm going to make is...
Mr. Getson, we're not going to recognize you right now.
Okay. When you're dealing with hundreds of millions of dollars, can you not invest $400 or $500 and get a screen people can read? That's all I've got to say.
You know what, Mr. Getz? I'll take that comment. That's a good one.
I'm out of here.
So where are we?
Mr. Jenkins, I move to approve express all in favor now and approve.
We've already done it.
Done? So we're done. Okay.
Folks, if you'll make your way out quietly so we can continue on here. We've got a couple more items of business we've got to handle. Item number 14 on the agenda. Let's wait for a second till we can clear the room. Folks, please take your conversations outside if you're going to leave.
I'm going to need you to use your dad voice, because the commissioner voice ain't working. You're getting ready to have to speak a little bit more aggressive.
All right. Going to move now to Resolution 2017-02. And I think what I'd like to do is I'm going to turn this over to Mr. Lee. I think he would like to read this resolution, possibly make some amendments on this.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Resolution formally recognizing Fred Rogers' impending retirement, whereas Whereas Vice Chairman David Jenkins has requested the Hendersonville Regional Planning Commission formally recognize Fred D. Rogers for his years of service and for the difference he has made in the quality of life in the city of Hendersonville, whereas Fred Rogers intends to retire from his position as Planning Director in July 2017. Therefore, be it resolved that the Hendersonville Regional Planning Commission formally recognizes Fred D. Rogers and his service to the city of Hendersonville, and then in addition, and commend him for his exemplary integrity, professionalism, and unique contribution to the development of our city, which has to our city in a manner that has and will continue to serve our citizens well for many years to come. Respectfully submitted.
Okay. We have that resolution. Has that amendment already been added to that?
No.
Okay, so we have a resolution before us, which you're offering as amended. We can amend it, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
We have the resolution.
Well,
Did you read the amended copy or just the resolution?
I read the amended.
Okay, if you would, let's just highlight what the amendments are so that we can have those.
I can give them to her. You mean read them?
Yeah.
And commends him for his exemplary integrity, professionalism, and unique contribution to the development of our city, in a manner that has and will continue to serve our citizens well for many years to come.
Can you present that resolution as your motion?
Yes, I
Okay,
will.
thank you. Any second on the second? Any discussion? I would just like to say that we're sure going to miss Fred and all the work that he's done for this city over the years. When I first came on the Planning Commission, I think it was your first or second year, it's 2004 when I came in. You were
2002.
2002. And a lot's happened over those periods of years, and definitely learned a lot from Fred over the years, and he is going to be missed. And we just want to publicly, as commissioners, say thank you very much for your investment of time and your resource. And because of you and because of your leadership, I think we have a better Hendersonville.
Thank you.
Amen.
Thank you.
All right.
I appreciate that, and I believe I've sent you all an email of my replacement. You've gotten the information on Keith, and looking forward to Keith stepping in here come July the 27th.
Any more discussion before we take a vote on this resolution as amended? All right, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, we got a unanimous one on that one. All right, let's move on to this, the resolution 2017-04, whereas Vice Chairman David Jenkins has requested the Hendersonville Regional Planning Commission formally recognize Bob Frudenthal for his years of service and the difference he has made in the quality of life of the city of Hendersonville. Whereas Bob Frudenthal intends to retire from his position as Hendersonville Regional Planning Commissioner as of June 2017, therefore be it resolved that the Hendersonville Regional Planning Commission formally recognizes Bob Frudenthal for his service to the city of Hendersonville, adopted the 6th day of June 2017 in Hendersonville, Sumner County, Tennessee. Can we have a motion to adopt?
So moved.
Second. Motion is second to adopt. Millsaps made the motion. Ms. Petrelli made the second. Any discussion? Okay. Once again, with Bob, he has been a worthy chairman over the years, and we're going to miss him greatly, I promise you. I've got to serve as his vice chair for a number of years now, and we have looked to him during the sticky points, and I've always teased him, he knows where all the pipes are in this town, and he knows where everything's at, and that's the truth. But we're going to miss him, and so we're indebted to Mr. Frudenthal. Any more discussion? Mr.
Mr. Chairman, having adopted the resolution on Chairman Frudenthal, it seems to be appropriate for us to entertain nominations from the commission for our new chairman. And I would, without objection, I'd like to make a motion.
You have a motion on the floor.
Yeah, can we take a final vote on this resolution?
I'm sorry. I apologize, Mr. Chairman.
All in favor of Resolution 2017-04, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Now, Mr. Millsap.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman. Apologize to the members.
Late.
I would recommend that the commission choose Brother Jenkins as our chairman of the commission going forward to lead us in a multitude of ways and multitude of decisions.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to nominate David Jenkins as the new chairman of the Planning Commission. Is there any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Well, once again, thank you so much for your vote. Tonight was a real test of that leadership. But
You
at the same
passed. You passed.
But at the same time, I owe a lot to Bob. Bob Frudenthal has taught me a lot about the procedures, and so has Fred. But in going forward, you know, what I would like to lay before us is that we as commissioners, and I said this to Fred and Keith going forward, looking forward to working with him, but it just seems like so much of the time that we're having to be very reactionary in what we do, where we're having to deal with things that we don't have all the answers to with regard to reports or with the developers, and we're not able to really be proactive in our planning process. And that's something that I've spoken to with Fred over the years, and I'm hoping that with this Stop 30 corridor study, that it could open up a new era of openness with our community and with the staff and with everybody else involved, Board, Mayor, and Alderman, that we can begin to, as the planning body, to start really doing what we need to be doing, and that is charting the course for this city for the next several years. And we all know the growth's coming, and I'm not sure that we can totally shut our doors to it, but we have to have a responsible way to go forward, and I'm excited about that process. And I'm excited to serve and help you with that. So with that, I thank you so much for your vote of confidence, and we'll do our best to serve you. We sure will. All right.
What about the 2017-05 resolution?
We also need a vice chair.
It was not on the agenda, but you want to do it tonight?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. There was one more resolution, wasn't there?
Yes.
Which was
2017-05.
street acceptance. Somebody, I get that right here. Yeah. Okay, this is a street acceptance, Resolution 2017-05, resolution recommending acceptance of the dedication of the completed Streets and Hunt Club, Phase 5, Hendersonville, Sumner County, Tennessee. I will suspend with the reading. Do I have a motion to approve?
Public Works approved?
Yes.
Okay. So moved.
Okay, got a motion, second? The Stringfellow seconds. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Mr. Rogers, anything about the zoning ordinance document you put before us?
Right. What Lauren just passed out is the updated pages that you need to insert in your zoning ordinance. These are the amendments that you passed 3 months ago relative to the donation collection bins and the accessory apartments and accessory dwellings.
Okay.
So just replace the old pages with those new pages that we just gave you.
All right, and having said that, we do need to move forward. Mr. Millsaps, do you want to open nominations possibly for, we need a motion or some nominations for vice chairman?
Can I make it?
Yes, you can.
I would like to nominate Miss Key McCormick.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have any more nominations? Okay, hearing none, we have a motion and a second for the nomination of Key Bryant McCormick to be vice chair of the Planning Commission. Hearing no discussion, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
Abstention.
You just got roped into it. Oh, okay. All right, and Mr. Rogers.
Just one other quick matter before we adjourn. Go ahead and mark on your calendar July the 13th. That's Thursday, July the 13th. You'll be getting an invitation, but I think the staff has in mind to have a little get-together for me and Bob together. So that'll probably be late in the afternoon, 4 o'clock or something like that. But we will be sending out an email for that soon. July 13th. I believe that, is that not the date? Lauren, do you recall, isn't that the date we've been discussing? Okay.
It'll be 4 to 6. Yeah,
Okay.
July 13th.
Yeah.
All right, duly noted. Thank you so much. Do I have a motion, Mr. Millsap?
1 minute, please. I got one more thing.
Oh, come on, Mr. Whitten.
Oh, come on, Timothy, we wouldn't
We're
have
Well, I've got you all here. The city is applying for a tree grant. as part of that grant, we need 3 citizens, 3 members of the planning commission to serve in an advisory capacity. There's very little time involved. When we get the grant together, we'll email you the grant. If you have any comments on it, you can email back to me. That's about the extent of it.
Tree grant.
Key.
Trees.
Key, me, and Darlene or Peg. One of y'all have to step up. Okay, Darlene, Key, and me.
Got you 3.
Thank you.
It's 3.
Some volunteer, some
Yes, I volunteer.
I like trees.
All right, before anybody else has any other business, do I have a motion to adjourn?
Let's go.
So moved, do I have a second? We're adjourned.
All right. That's